so that the immigration department can in fact do some sort of preliminary vetting?
Indeed. And in fact, we're going to be going further, because what we've seen is that, of course, when letters are put in, they're not necessarily complete. And then our officers spend an awful lot of time looking into things that perhaps would be more clear. What we're going to be implementing and putting in place is a checklist that will be accompanying that application with areas where the names of the individuals and contact details are placed. And if the employer signs that form and the information is found to be incorrect and it is not true, then they will be prosecuted, because they will have a declaration at the bottom to say, I swear that the information contained in this is true. So that's going to become, we have to improve that area. That's an area that has been identified very quickly for improvement.
Okay, so would that have been more comforting to the people had those things been put in place and then the work permit policy done away with?
I hear you, but again, I'm simply going to repeat what I've said from the beginning.
Well, then
Term limits and work permit policies are not the same.
All right.
Cordell.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Rowley. Brother Tony?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Anthony Williams. My question is, how fast are you going to work on with the employers that refuse and abuse Bermudians who are qualified to do these jobs? I've been a victim, so this is part of your job, how you go about it. Number two, God.
We haven't seen the moment.
There's so much I'm going to say, because I'm a victim. I've been a victim of an employer who can't stand Bermudians. Verbally said that. It's catch-22 with employers hiring Bermudians and so forth like that. My question is, where do I go to remove these individuals who have no care for Bermudians? So I'm new to this here, because I've always been employed, right? And I have many years experience in 5 different industries: investments, hospitality, marine, and construction. And I've experienced all these employees, mostly in construction and recently in the hospitality industry. Employers just are fed up with Bermudians. Like I said, it's a catch-22 with them to hire people, because it's a catch-22. Okay. But there's no excuse for that. Where do I go to for that? Because I'm frustrated and I'm well experienced in all 5 categories. So I'm looking for a job, and if you can help me, I'm also having experience to train young people. I recently joined the MERS program to share my experience and my knowledge. To groom. One gentleman said it before, how he started as a busboy in the 80s. I'm from the 80s. I'm from the old school where everything was Bermudian. We had our shop students and everything. So my question is, I need to be employed to bring back Bermuda the way how it used to be.
Thank you.
That's what I need. Okay?
Thank you.
So,
thank you, Brother Tony. Minister, just if we could, because there's a lot of people, and this question has always been in the back of my mind. Is there a way, or will the government look at something where when an individual thinks that somebody's been blacklisted, where they could come and have their concerns genuinely heard and these employers redressed? But as you answer his question, please.
The current, as you can now do, there is the immigration hotline. If you have complaints about employers who are breaching policy, those issues are investigated when a complaint is received. The officers spend a lot of time doing that. That is their job, is to do investigations, conduct investigations. They interview people, and they come to determinations that is then brought to the minister in terms of rogue employers or whether or not someone should have been employed. So that's the first thing in terms of the enforcement side. In terms of the unemployment issue, we are working to ensure that the Department of Labor and Training has the right things in place to help people find employment, and you have to be registered.
Not to cut you off, I have been exploiting the National Training Board to the fullest. They think I'm an employee down there. I got my resumes, cover letters right here, Papa. Okay? So I don't want to hear nothing. Okay? Action needs to be done now. There are people in here. Oh, look at these people. Half of them are older than me. You need experience. I don't care what degrees you have in anything. You cannot beat experience. You cannot be the experience. That is the honest God's truth. You cannot be the experience. I'm even been an assistant broker. I even do macroeconomics. I can manage $500 million. And the reason why I can't do it, because I haven't passed the Canadian Securities course, which I'm doing right now. I used to be a certified broker in 2000.
Okay.
It's a course at Series 7. So if you want to help somebody with knowledge up here to groom our young people, I'm the guy, Papa. So you got to put me somewhere where I can do it.
Thank you, Brother Tony. Thank you. Sister? The gentleman behind Sister Sherry, Mr. Simons, will be the last, and the brother here from Rebella will be the last as well. Go ahead, sister, pose your question, please.
I actually have two questions and a comment. First, I'd like the minister to speak to, I hear all night that we're putting in place plans and policies to enforce and structure the work permit more properly. I haven't heard any detail of that structure here tonight, and if perhaps you're not prepared, given that you're new into the office, to speak to those, I would like to have some sort of formal communication back to the public to give us those assurances that you're putting those things in place. Mainly because we're talking a lot about the international business sector. That's where I'm from. That's where I'm qualified in, and that's where you get the most BS from in the work permit application process. My comment is, and I've made this comment at other forums, and I've never seen it explored, is that people like me who are qualified, who in fact are more qualified than those that you are giving term limits to, and have told them so, are not consulted by your board, who are in no way qualified to read those work permits that are coming in for the international business sector. Therefore, it's people like me who have offered up free of charge, not at $120,000, excuse me, to give consultation for certain work permits. So that's my question. Outside of that, for my edification, I hear about penalties being enforced. I'd like to know if in fact that is legislated now, and if so, what are those penalties? Are they high enough? Because we also know it takes you about 3 years to push something through your legislative council. We don't have 3 years to wait for these penalties to come through to effect them.
My chief immigration officer and permanent secretary are used to me hearing and saying the phrase "in short order." I can do things as quickly as I can. Now, I've been criticized for doing term limits quickly. I can do some of these other things just as quickly when we put our minds to it. And that is what we are doing. Some things are policy, and some things have to be legislated. So I'm doing this as quickly as we possibly can, and that was one of the pledges that we made.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you. Sir?
Good evening.
Last one from this side.
First, I just want to make a statement aimed at Mr. Vera when he talked about the waiter program. As a member of the National Training Board for several years, I know, in fact, that we did have hundreds of people apply for that. What we did do in the National Training Board is we did the vetting for the employer and eliminated people who we did not think was suitable. And then, once they graduated, they were guaranteed employment. The problem we had with the program is that they did not get the employment. So once they did not get the promised employment, we had difficulty recruiting people to apply for that again. Again, speaking to the next gentleman, the butcher program is something that has been worked on for close to a year. And I happen to know at this very moment that a program has been selected in the UK, and there will be young people going off to that program through the National Training Board. So there are things that have been working, but they just have not been advertised out there.
Thank you. Thank you.
The National Training Board also has several apprenticeship contracts out there, and this is aimed at Mr. Simons, where employers can come and say that they want to train someone, sign an apprentice program, and a program will be helped, designed, and partially paid for, if not totally paid for, by the government to allow those individuals to become skilled. So all employers have to do is approach, ask, and they will be helped. Now, the question that I want to ask has to do with, we all talk about term limits and work permits. What I want to know is what is being put in place to ensure that professions that require very little skill set will not be allowed to be, they will not allow people to stay in Bermuda beyond a prescribed time. What I'm talking about is, why should a company like Buzz be allowed to bring in someone to serve food and not be subject to their work permit lasting beyond 2 or 3 years? Why should someone who comes here as a waiter, as a landscaper, or a profession, I'm not talking down on those professions, but professions that Bermudians can get qualified locally without leaving Bermuda, why should those categories not be subject to a policy in which a person can come here and after 3 years, 5 years, they are done without any chance of being extended?
Thank you, sir. Very good question.
Just partially on the National Training Board, because I'm on that board, and the last information I saw in terms of the employment of waiters and training was that the vast majority of them, like of the 60% that completed the course, something like, if there were 60, 55 were employed. Other people who had taken part in the program, one in particular, we couldn't understand why he took the program and decided that he didn't like being in the waiting industry at the end of the day. I can't answer the other part of the question, but I'll turn it over to the Minister.
Well, we want to
Again,
the Minister. Yeah,
in relation to the Senator's question, there is a work permit policy in place. Whether or not it's, I won't name individual restaurants, but every time that employee's permit comes up, then a Bermudian has the opportunity to apply. And it's up to the board, it's up to the Department of Immigration to make sure that Bermudians are given the opportunity. You don't need term limits to say, okay, that person comes and maybe another guest worker is hired in that position. We need to make sure that Bermudians are properly trained for those roles. I mean, that its position is the same across the board.
Okay, thank you. Sister.
Let me just add just a brief comment.
Okay, go ahead.
In relationship to employment, and I think this is the overall challenge, because whilst we understand the need for workers to be in our country from other different parts of the world, when we look at the overall employment in Bermuda, particularly, and I'll just go back from 1978, 83% of the workforce of 1978 was Bermudian, 17% were migrant workers. Okay? Let's wind the clock forward 10 years to 1988. 1990, let's do 1990. We have 77% of the workforce Bermudian and 23% foreigners. Let's wind the clock forward all the way to 2011. We have 70% Bermudians and 30% foreigners. So you can see how that dynamic has changed over that period of time.
All right, thank you.
All right, good evening again to the panel. This question is sort of bouncing off what was said earlier. This is specifically to the Minister. Again, good evening, Minister. You mentioned during your press conference announcing the abolition of term limits in Bermuda, you specifically addressed the issue of related to guest workers, and this is what you said about that. The recent online blogs and talk show radios have been rampant with this negative rhetoric being targeted at non-Bermudians. So my question to you, Minister, notwithstanding the few comments that we do see online that are distasteful in reference to our migrant workers, I would put to you that the vast majority of anti-statements are actually aimed at Bermudians, and that didn't just start. That's been going on for a number of years, and I don't ever recall anyone, in particular the then opposition OBA and the current now governing administration OBA, addressing the rampant anti-Bermudian attitudes that are online. Can you speak to that? Have I missed a statement about that?
I know I've spoken to it before, and in fact I actually answered a question from Mr. Johnson at that same press conference and said it was both unacceptable. Okay. I made that comment at that press conference.
You also in the press conference alluded to the fact that you were somewhat disappointed that your hands were tied in terms of monitoring these comments. What specifically did you mean by that? Are we looking towards moving towards banning some of these comments we're seeing online?
No, I think that when people make comments online that could certainly be seen as anti-Bermudian or xenophobic, I think that the moderators of that have got to be very careful because of what it creates in the community. I'm not saying that we have to prevent freedom of speech. We've just got to be careful online. The now opposition has complained about it. This is not directed at the government. This is just generally in relation to making sure that we have good relations between Bermudians and guest workers, and it goes both ways. I said that at that press conference.
Thank you.
And, sir, for clarification, in reference to Mr. Branco's statement, the lady alluded to it earlier, and I gave you the actual, are you, just for sake of clarity, are you in agreement with that statement from the deputy chairperson of the One Bermuda Alliance?
I don't have a reference point as to what Mr. Branco was responding to.
He was responding, he was responding to the complaints about people complaining about the removal of term limits. And this was in a press release that was released from the One Bermuda Alliance from Michael Branco, the deputy chair. And in that press release, it read, "We believe the reason they went ahead with putting the policy in place was to pander to the xenophobic views of those Bermudians who would like Bermuda to be foreigner-free." So my question to you specifically, Minister, do you agree with the deputy chairman's position on that matter? This is an official party statement.
Yeah, I think the comment is harsh, but it has to be taken presumably in the context of what was said. I do not have the statement.
Okay.
No, take it
Is
easy.
it my turn?
Okay. All right.
Good evening.
Real quickly, my dear.
Yes, real quickly. Good evening to our guests. My question, just to dovetail on Sherry J, a big part of solving all these vicious comments would be to make people sign their real name.
Yes, yeah.
That's my personal position.
I
But
agree too.
to the newly appointed minister, I think what you're hearing tonight is outside of term limits. What guarantees do we have as Bermudians, Black Bermudians in particular, seeing as I'm speaking as my own persuasion, about the even playing field? Let me just speak personally and say that my views are not from the Royal Gazette, but I'd like to hear from you. Having been in the media since '84, off and on, I've seen UBP, PLP, OBA, BDA. The one figure that I've seen that stayed consistent in immigration outside of how big the civil service is the number of your inspectors in immigration has remained the same. Now, I know the previous government implemented some system whereby you carry a card, right? But there's a lot of skullduggery going on the workplace. And I think that what Bermudians want to hear outside of this lifting of term limits is what guarantees do you bring to the table to A, bring the playing field even? Has the number of inspectors changed? And what are they doing exactly as to what's going on in the workplace? Because you can just go on a construction site and not see too many people who look like me. And as the parent of a young Black Bermudian male, with a government and a system that has a cell earmarked for him at Westgate, I want to hear what you're saying.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ciola. As to the number of immigration inspectors, I don't know what numbers there have been in the past. It's 4. No, that's okay. I don't know what the numbers were before. It would be great to be able to have more, and that's something that we can certainly look at. Having said that, the inspectors work very, very hard investigating complaints every single day. We need to do more, and I've said that I've not shied away from any of that. We have to level the playing field and make sure that Bermudians are given every opportunity in the workplace. That means increasing penalties. That means making sure that the work permit policies are followed and they're followed properly.
Thank you.
That's the task of the board as well, to make sure of that, and they've been tasked with that.
All right, thank you.
Can I just say, though, with X number of Bermudians, and we still don't have a hardcore figure as to how many, but we see unskilled workers still packing shelves in certain stores. It's a little difficult for Bermudians to buy Bermuda if they're not hired in Bermuda.
Thank you. Thank you, Sierra. Mr. Simons, good evening.
Mr. Chairman, I'm Gerald Simons. I've got a question for the Minister. Would the Minister give some thought to developing some better means of educating the wider public of Bermuda on what is going on in our island, particularly from a demographic perspective? Brother Chris Ferbert cited some numbers this evening. I'm impressed by his knowledge of what's going on. We've got more and more foreigners working here, and he understands the need for these workers. But clearly the public at large doesn't fully see the picture, because in the years to come, we will need even more non-Bermudians living and working here. And so I think there's a real need for there to be, I don't know, some major approach to educating the man on the street and the public at large on what is happening, because we Bermudians are sensitive about foreigners taking our land, taking jobs, getting opportunities, and also on voting, even though we like to marry non-Bermudians. But so the minister would give some thought to that. I'd appreciate his comments on how to educate the public.
Thank you, Mr. Simons. Let me just say, Mr. Sarge, the gentleman after you, that's the last one as we wrap this thing up this evening. Because you got up so late. Tony, I'm sorry, you had a chat. Mr. Sarge, go ahead, please.
Good evening. My name is Carmen Sars.
We'll let you wrap up all these
I have, in the mid-'80s, I was in the hospitality industry. In fact, I was a maitre d'. During that time, myself and my assistants, we trained over 100 Bermudians as busboys. In fact, one of the young gentlemen that spoke tonight was a qualified person in the hospitality industry. During the 80s, mid-'80s, we worked with an agency in Toronto called Renard International Hospitality Agency, where we would go overseas because they wouldn't allow us to use busboys anymore. We would go overseas and employ persons. During the time when we got there, we would have something like a few hundred people that was interested in working in Bermuda. By the time we worked it out, we ended up with about 5 or 6 persons that was actually capable of being waiters in Bermuda. Now, when actually some of those persons are still here today working in Bermuda, and that was the mid-'80s. They never missed a day and never been unemployed. Yet we still have Bermudians that's been in the hospitality industry that can't get back into the industry. And then when you say that you had a training program and you can't find Bermudians, I don't understand that. I mean, I know that Bermudians, as long as they're trained, they work just as well or even better than some of the persons that we bring into the island. So there is also...
Your question, Mr. Sars, please.
Okay. I get disgusted when I go to a hotel and I go for dinner and I go to a banquet or whatever and we can't find Bermudians that is capable of doing that job. When we know that there's Bermudians that's out here that is capable of working in this industry. So, and I also know that employers, because I've worked with them, that they would find any and every excuse not to hire Bermudians in the hospitality industry. I know that. And I know there's hundreds of Bermudians out here now that have been trained and capable of doing the job, but they cannot, and the hotels and the restaurants would not hire them.
Right.
And I'm under the impression the only reason is because, and some of them have come to me, and some of the foreign workers have come to me, they are paying employees out of gratuities. They don't pay them a basic wage. They have to wait weeks to 2 weeks to get wages, and Bermudians cannot work like that. Okay. The wages in the industry is going from they're making 50% of what we were making 20 and 30 years ago. That's in the hospitality industry.
Right, thank
and you don't expect for Bermudians to work like that. This is what's happening.
Thank you. My good man? No. Sir, you're the last one. You're the last one. Sorry, bro.
That's the bad.
That's it. Sorry. Yes,
Good
please.
evening, everyone.
We have a time limit. I'm sorry. Okay.
Gentlemen, it looks clear to me, coming here this evening, I came with an open mind to try and understand here why is it so quick to make this decision. Now, when I look at this panel, it's quite clear to me. We are split right down the middle. This side has already made up their mind. The business model of this country was changed in the middle of the 90s. It was big business driven. It was no longer hospitality. And that is quite clear. It's a clear vision. The question was asked tonight, what is the vision for the future of Bermuda? Are we now saying that 87% of the workforce in the 80s up to the mid-90s were the majority of Bermudians employed in the economy? And now it's completely opposite. What I would like, Mr. MC, you call it? Jim, just something. I would like to, at the end, have a show of hands.
Yes.
Because obviously, whoever organized this wanted to get input from the public.
Yes, that's exactly right.
I voted to make sure that that promise was that they were going to spend 2 years to look at this policy. Big business has come in here and now dictating and saying, this is what we want, and that's what we are going to get.
Thank you, thank
So
you.
let's have a show of hands
That's
of
right.
what we really see here. And I also suggest to the minister that maybe we should have more forums like this throughout the island. Withhold back the term limit until the people of Bermuda have spoken.
Hey, sir. I've heard this gentleman many times on the radio, not been able to put a face to his comments. But I think that's a real relevant question before we leave here, so everybody understands. How many want to see term limits stay in place? Raise your hands, so the minister and the government can understand. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. Thank you. As I said just a few moments ago, I want to especially thank the panelists here this evening. Minister, thanks for your time. Shadow Minister, thank you. Brother Mike, Mr. Jensen, Mr. Vera, Brother Chris, we thank you guys. There will be some others, I'm sure. I think we touched a nerve here. And if we can, please come again, and I hope you've enjoyed what was put out this evening. Thank you.